Have you ever wondered what would happen if Isagi was raised by the world's best striker Noel Noa? Would he still join the Blue Lock project? Or would he now fight Kaiser for the top spot? And most importantly, would he become stronger or weaker than his original version? Well, for starters, we'll assume this would all begin before Isagi ever joined Blue Lock, more specifically, during his high school game. Just like in the original timeline, Isagi's team would end up eliminated after he passed the ball to his teammate instead of taking the shot. And it was right after this that things would start to change. Because this time, watching Isagi lose that game in the final moments was none other than the world's best striker Noel Noa. You see, it just so happens that in this alternative timeline, Noah was visiting Japan when he came across Isagi's game, and something would immediately catch his attention. You see, as we know, while the rest of the team were on their last game together, Isagi was the only one upset about losing the game and regretting ever passing the ball in the first place. Now Noah would immediately notice that Isagi was being suppressed by this environment, that his anger and ego didn't match anyone around him and was in fact closer to his own. So Noah would walk up to Isagi after the match and ask him why he passed the ball, to which Isagi, surprised to see his idol in front of him, would reply that it was the right play to make, but that he would take it back if he could. So Noah would give him a chance, leave Japanese football behind, and come train under him in Germany. Why? Well, the reason was simple. You see, Noah only truly cares about one thing. He wants a rival capable of challenging him and push him to evolve even further on the field. And after that answer, Noah would start to see the hidden potential behind Isagi's ego that was still yet to hatch. Because of that, he decides to take matters into his own hands and create his own potential threat for the future. And so, Isagi would accept the offer, flying all the way to Germany where he would now join Bastard Munchen's academy teams, and just like that, never get the chance to join Blue Lock. Now this is where everything about Isagi would start to change. You see, unlike Blue Lock, this wasn't a survival game built to awaken his ego, it was a professional academy. Which means the level here would be far higher than anything Isagi would have faced in the project this early on. And so, right off the bat, Isagi would be exposed. He would quickly realize he was behind these academy players in almost everything that mattered. Physically, technically, and even mentally. All the things years of coaching had given them, and that Isagi simply didn't have yet. Because of that, he wouldn't walk straight into the top. You see, he would instead start at the lower levels of the academy, nowhere near the top players. On top of that, there was the language barrier. Isagi would be completely alone in a different country, unable to lean on anyone around him. But here's the thing, that loneliness wouldn't break him. It would do the opposite. With nobody to rely on and nothing to fall back on but himself, Isagi's true ego would slowly start to surface. And that was exactly what Noah was waiting for. You see, Noah wouldn't train him openly like some star player. Instead, he would quietly start feeding Isagi pieces of his own game, his techniques, his way of thinking, and his way of reading the field, all in hopes of shaping the rival he came looking for. So, step by step, Isagi would start to rebuild himself. First would come the body. For the first time, Isagi would train his physical traits relentlessly, pushing them to levels they never reached before in Blue Lock. Thanks to that would come his biggest new weapon, the ambidextrous ability. Trained under Noah from the very beginning, this would be the biggest twist about Isagi's evolution. He would now learn one of the most overpowered abilities in the entire verse and become a striker capable of shooting with both feet. And finally, the most important piece. Noah would teach him how to truly see the game. The way of seeing the field that would trigger Isagi's ego and unlock his metavision far earlier than the original story. Which means, with Isagi's insane IQ, paired up with a body that no longer held him back, an ambidextrous weapon, and metavision this early on, you would get a completely different striker. In fact, a true #1 on the field. Thanks to that, Isagi would start climbing, clearing the lower levels, surpassing player after player, until he would finally earn his way to the top of the academy. And that is where he would finally meet Kaiser for the very first time. Now, in the original timeline, Isagi and Kaiser wouldn't cross paths until the new Egoist League, but in this version, their rivalry would start way earlier. You see, the moment Isagi joined Kaiser's team, both of them would be chasing the exact same thing, to become Bastard Munchen's future ace, and most importantly, become the successor to Noel Noa. Which means, this rivalry would now be on a completely different level than ever before, and that would play exactly into Noah's hands. Now, here's the thing, this would be a completely different Isagi compared to when they faced against each other in the original timeline. Thanks to developing his body to a whole new level, Isagi would now be able to keep up with Kaiser's physical traits. But despite that, he would still struggle in this matchup early on. After all, in Bastard Munchen's lower teams, despite the highest competition, there was no rival to push him further like Rin and to evolve his ego to higher levels. And much like in the original story, where Isagi faced defeat during the first meeting with Rin, the same would happen now with Kaiser. But as expected, it wouldn't take long for the genius of adaptability to get better and finally reach Kaiser's level. Now, while Isagi was carving his path in Germany, Blue Lock would still be happening. You see, without Isagi ever joining the project, the story would still run its course. Rin, Nagi, Baro, Shiro, and Machira, all of them would still develop and still fight their way through the first selections. And it's safe to say, without Isagi there to challenge him, Rin would absolutely dominate the entire project, standing as the clear #1 striker in Blue Lock. But there was one player in particular that would come out of this differently. You see, in the original timeline, it was Isagi who made Nagi obsessed, and that obsession is exactly what eventually cost Nagi his motivation and his elimination later on in the story. But in this version, without Isagi there to trigger any of that, Nagi would never get obsessed and so would never lose his drive in the first place. Now, that does not mean he would be stronger. After all, with nobody pushing him, Nagi would just keep following Ryu and doing the bare minimum to keep up. But thanks to his talents being through the roof, that might just be enough to save him later on. But before that, Blue Lock would still reach the U20 match. They would defeat Japan, with Ren being the hero this time around. Which would bring us to the Neo Egoist League. And this is where our two timelines would finally collide. You see, this is the time where Isagi and Kaiser would join the Neo Egoist League, leading the Bastard Munchin squad. So the question is, would the rest of the league change or would the squads look exactly the same? Well, most of the teams would actually be identical. After all, Isagi missing would not be enough for the strikers to choose differently, since they never picked their teams for Isagi in the first place. And so, the biggest change would actually come from Bastard itself. You see, initially, none of the Blue Lock players knew Isagi. After all they had ever heard was that much like Sai, there was one Japanese player out there playing for a top club. So the Blue Lock players would not instantly connect with him, which means his biggest connection with Yori and other Blue Lock players would be way weaker than before. But on the other side, thanks to Isagi joining Bastard Munchin way before they joined the league, their squad would no longer be divided in two and they would now just feed both Isagi and Kaiser. So, as expected, with Isagi and Kaiser leading the way, Bastard would once again tear through the entire league, all the way up until the game against PXG and the new Blue Lock hero Itoshi Ren. And here is where the next big moment would happen, because this is where the rivalry between Ren and Isagi would finally be born once again. Now, at first, things wouldn't go smoothly for Isagi. You see, despite his new abilities, he would get caught completely off guard by Ren's genius talent. After all, even after being developed by Noah, Isagi was still a talented learner and not a born genius. So he would have to once again figure out plays to beat players like Rin and Loki, which would then lead him to confront Loki and challenge Noah just like he did in the original timeline. But here's the twist. In this alternative timeline, Isagi would no longer have to rely on Kaiser to keep up with Rin. You see, thanks to Noah's training, this time Isagi would actually be able to closely match Rin physically and stand up to him on the field. And if the original version of Isagi was enough to beat Rin and PXG, it's safe to assume an Isagi with his ambidextrous ability, no physical traits, and a metavision more evolved than before would be more than enough for them to come out on top and once again win the Neo Egoist League. And here's what makes this one different. Thanks to this, Isagi would beat Kaiser, surpassing all of Bastard Munchin's academy players and so win their bet and become Noah's successor. Now, as for the rankings, Isagi would finish with the highest bid in the entire league, with Kaiser coming in right behind him. But since Isagi was never actually part of Blue Lock itself, here's how the real rankings would look like. Rin would be ranked number 1, Shiro would now move up to number 2, and Nagi, now not being eliminated thanks to Isagi never joining the project, would finish at number 3, with the rest of the players following. Which means it was now time for the U20 World Cup. Now, like I said before, in this timeline, Isagi would be far stronger at this point than he ever was in the original story. And a player like that, Ego wouldn't let it slip through his fingers. So even though Isagi was never a part of Blue Lock, Ego would still take the chance to grab Noah's successor for himself and use him as a weapon to push Blue Lock strikers even further. Which means Isagi would get the call to join Japan's squad and so heading into the U20 World Cup. Now, thanks to that, Rin and Isagi's rivalry would start heating up like before, and Ego would decide to build the entire team around them. Because of that, Blue Lock would thrive. After all, having a supposed outsider leading the team would make all the other strikers hungry to devour Isagi and Rin alike. With that, Blue Lock would evolve to a whole new level during this World Cup, starting off with a match against Nigeria. And in the beginning, things would look fairly similar. You see, with Isagi now at this level, Japan would dominate Nigeria 6-0. But it was in the match against France that things would look completely different. You see, in the original timeline, France didn't fully respect Blue Lock going in. But this time, with a true #1 striker like Isagi, that would no longer be the case. Loki would respect Isagi's talents a whole lot more, and Hugo wouldn't even bother trying his mind games this time around. And so, taking Blue Lock seriously from the very beginning, France would come out on fire, getting off to a hot start and taking the lead early on, just like they did in the original timeline. But this time, it wouldn't take too long for Isagi to show up. You see, Isagi would start dismantling the entire French squad. Using his ambidextrous ability and that insane IQ, he would look completely unstoppable on the field. And here's where it gets dangerous for France, because as Isagi rose, so would Ren and the entire Blue Lock team. Which means, thanks to those two dragging everyone forward, the whole squad would evolve at an insane rate. And that alone would give Japan a far higher chance of winning not only this match, but the entire U20 World Cup. And so, with Isagi leading the way, Blue Lock would take down France with a narrow 3-2 victory. As for the rest of the tournament, well see, with a true #1 Isagi, a rivalry with Rin pulling the whole team to new levels, and Sai joining the squad for the later matches, it's safe to say this Japan would be far more dangerous than before. Though it's not crazy to assume they might go all the way, defeating teams like Spain, Italy, and France once again, and win the U20 World Cup. But how far do you think they would go? Let me know down below in the comments. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this one next, where I created an alternative scenario where the Blue Lock players were reborn with all their memories. Go on!